We are live.
Here today with us, Peter Merel, CEO of Xscale Alliance, an alliance which I am a member of myself, and we are very pleased to have him here with us in the Business Agility Conference Paris. Xscale has been recognized by Gartner in its 2016 and 2017 and 2018 market guides on agile business frameworks. And we are the first institutional member of the Business Agility Institute, a strategic partner of the Agile Business Consortium, and the first institutional signatory of Agnostic Agile. Peter Merel is accredited in the first Agile book created the Agile training game and presented it at the first Agile conference. And a game which is more and more known, and it's called Game Without Thrones. I will let him talk about it a few moments later. Peter, I am very proud to have you here. Peter, for those who don't know, has been my trainer for several trainings. So it's an honor to have him here with us. Peter, the stage is yours.
No, Sam, you're going to make me blush. Thank you so much. That was a lovely intro. The very first Agile conference back in 2000, we didn't run the game we're going to touch on today. We ran a game that was about a team level. And the stuff we're talking about today is about entire enterprises. I mentioned when I interjected in the last session that there's not just one flywheel. If we think that the flywheels we're talking about are about how learning flows through an organization, then the problem we're facing in every organization across the world, and it's exacerbated by living online as we are forced to do now, the problem is bureaucracy. We've all lived inside bureaucracies. We know that there's no fun to be had inside a bureaucracy. But the more that you look at the way they work, the more you realize bureaucracies are inefficient at sharing learning, at accelerating the flow of learning. And learning is critical because we live in a VUCA world. Unprecedented changes are happening all the time. And if we cannot respond to these changes in the market, then we can't compete. And it doesn't really matter how strong our base is. So to be able to deal with bureaucracy, well, we could talk in game-theoretic terms. And there was some talk about trust in the last session. There's a beautiful website by a fellow named Nick Case called The Evolution of Trust that looks at how trust evolves and how distrust evolves in game-theoretic terms. I'm not going to touch on that today either, because I want to look at something practical. If we're going to make these flywheels spin around fast, we're going to have to look at something that's a little bit different to the status quo. And you might feel that some of the ideas you're about to see are a little bit challenging. Well, I've got enough gray hair to say that Agile was challenging enough back in the day. This is a set of ideas that are derived from Xscale in the main, but they touch on business agility in general. So, open content license, yay. We want to understand bureaucracy in terms of things we can measure, because you can't optimize something you can't measure. We want to understand how, we had some talk about the people at the top, the leaders. Hierarchy is not a bad thing. We cannot get away from hierarchy. Hierarchy is a wonderful way for us to be able to make certain we can limit the number of people who have to be able to get together and agree in order to make a decision. If you had a big enterprise and everybody had to be consulted, you would be stuck in quicksand, in quagmire. So we have a model for autonomy at team level in alignment to the objectives of the organization, its constraint, its market constraint, if you think in terms of theory of constraints, but also as a way to align the teams, the autonomous teams, to each other. And the beautiful thing is, it's simple. And we have a way to play it. Just like the way we played Agile back in that first Agile conference 20-something years ago. This is a game that lets us try this stuff out in the small, get an experience of it. And Issam and Leila asked me whether I'd be willing to run one of these for conference attendees. So I'm going to share a link. We're going to run one of these 1 week from today, same time, for a 3-hour session for free for 60 conference attendees. And if we don't get enough takers, then we'll open it up to all of Europe. But I have a feeling we'll get enough takers. We'll see. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the game. I'm here to talk about bureaucracy. So to begin with, I'm going to move that over there. To begin with, we've heard a lot of things about, can we scale Agile? I don't care if we can scale Agile. I care about business throughput. So in order to get business throughput to accelerate, I don't think that scaling is the answer. I think scaling is the problem. I think we have to find a way to descale our organization. And whatever we're doing at a team level, if we have autonomous teams, then they're going to decide how they work. We can try and inform it, we can try and coach it. But if we try and tell them how to work, then it's not really fair to call them autonomous. So let's not talk at a team level. Let's think in terms of organizations. I want to put 3 very simple metrics on the table. The distance, the conversational distance between the person who makes the decisions and the person who executes the decisions. We call it the doer-decider distance. The maximum meeting numbers. How many people do we have to have in a meeting across the whole organization? What's the maximum size meeting we need to have to be able to make a decision in this organization? And the lateral learning latency sounds very fancy. I dreamed it up a couple of days ago, so it's not very fancy. I just needed a name for this thing. Let me see if I can move the bar out of the way. Maybe I can make it smaller. Hang on. There. So lateral learning latency, how long does it take for learning to get from one team to another team across the whole organization? So if I pick on SAFe, I want to immediately say, I am not saying that SAFe is bad. I am saying it can be improved. So if I look at the framework, I'm not very fond of frameworks. I like toolkits. I like pattern languages. But let's look at it as a framework. There are many roles in SAFe. What is the maximum doer-decider distance that it calls out? 6. Everybody knows the Dunbar number. Everybody is wrong. 150 is not the Dunbar number. If you look on YouTube, you can find an interview I did with Robin Dunbar himself at the start of last year, where he will tell you that the maximum size of a functional work group is 60. But SAFe says it's 150. Who am I to disagree? Lateral learning latency. Well, SAFe has this big learning event, the big room meeting, the PI planning, all of the IP sprint before, all of that once every 3 months. And in the meanwhile, there is a whole bunch of alignment activities, but they're all rushed. There's a lot of people in the room. Everybody is trying to get their bit in and they have to wait for each other. And you get the idea. And I think you probably have had the experience. So I'm going to talk about this game. We're not going to play it today. We'll play it next week if you want to. And it's a game where it's for 60 people. So that's the Dunbar number. Could we do it for thousands of people? I think so, but I don't care if we can do it for thousands of people. I think if we can accelerate learning through a group of 9 small self-organizing teams and get them aligned, well, then we've broken the back of the problem. Anyway, the maximum doer-decider distance in this game is 1, which is to say most of the time it's actually face-to-face, just like the Agile Manifesto says in one of those principles that certain framework people ignore completely. And the maximum size of any meeting, doesn't matter how big the organization, is 6. And the lateral learning latency is 20 minutes? 20 minutes. Now, If you are running a hamburger franchise, you don't need a lateral learning latency of 20 minutes. I mean, you don't need the hamburger flippers in one part of your organization to share their learning with the hamburger flippers in another part of your organization for many months. But if you are a knowledge working organization, that's an advantage. It's a competitive advantage. Leadership as a service is a very basic decision-making, consensus-based decision-making pattern that we get from First Nations peoples, in particular, a North American group called the Haudenosaunee. We've made it as simple as possible. So this is not what they do. They've inspired us. And likewise, they've inspired that picture by a European painter. They don't look like that. Though they were matriarchal, there was indeed a lady who was arbitering the way that things worked. And we're going to talk about that role in just a moment. But the fundamental is something that actually resurfaced in Apple under Steve Jobs, this idea of a directly responsible individual. Any agenda item of a meeting, any work item in a backlog, if you don't have one person who is directly responsible for it, then committees start to kick it around and then bureaucracy sets in. So how do we pick these DRIs? It's not too surprising. We do it the same way that a parliament would, except we're talking about very small groups. So we're not used to doing it this way. If we have a scrum master and the scrum master acts as this sort of speaker of the house, that's great. But whoever is doing it, there's a certain protocol we want them to follow. And that begins with this idea. They are directly responsible for recognizing directly responsible individuals in the meeting or in the team. And so we'll call the role a speaker so that we don't make assumptions about it that come from frameworks. The key distinction is this speaker, they're not the prime minister. They never decide on what proposals, they never decide on how to decide the proposals. They only recognize, they decide who the DRIs are, and they decide when unanimous consent is taking too long, because sometimes it does. I don't want to knock the Dutch. I love an awful lot of Dutch people, but polder democracy is notorious for taking a long time. And sometimes decisions need to be made fast, particularly when we're talking about small teams. Small teams can make decisions very fast. It's one of the great advantages of them. So if the speaker says that it's taking too long for us to get unanimous, well then, if everyone except for the DRI is the person who made a proposal or is carrying responsibility for execution, if everybody except that person is unanimous in that little room, in that little team, then they should overrule the DRI. The DRI has to influence them. If the DRI can't lead through influence, if we have to hand authority to the DRI, then we wind up with the same old. So, but if everyone except for the DRI is not unanimous, then the DRI decides. So if it's a team of 6, if the DRI can get one of the other 5, just one, to disagree with the others, not necessarily agree with him or her, then the DRI gets to decide at least until unanimity occurs. And so in the Haudenosaunee, they made a distinction between peace chiefs and war chiefs. The war chiefs were people who would make the decision when you didn't have time to decide. Now, one other thing we're going to talk about, and this is what we're going to play with in the game next week, and this is something we call the Camelot Model. I don't want to make too much of a muchness about this. I said we're going to play with 9 little teams, 6 people in each team. There's a concept called quality circles that some of you might feel resembles Spotify model chapters. In fact, this is a concept, quality circles, that goes back to the original Western lean conception, lean manufacturing. Quality circles are very well understood, very well established, very successful pattern. And it started in the 60s. It didn't start 10, 15 years ago. So the difference between quality circles and what we're used to hearing about for chapters is that quality circles are going to be small. And quality circles are going to be small because of the way we arrange our arrangement of teams. And because of the way we hand missions out to these teams, we do this breadth first. We're not going to talk about breadth first product agility in this session. There's a pattern language for doing that. It doesn't matter. We don't need that to do this. Now, what we've got here, if we look at it, is an awful lot of these little groups of 3 people. Why 3? If you have 2 people, one person talks about something, the other person listens, it can take a long time. If you have 3 people, one person's not so interested. They will interrupt. They will say, hey, that means they will lead the conversation on. What we found is that if you have 4 people, then it splits into 2 pairs, and then they have to fill each other in later. 3 people is like the atom of learning flow. So we have a lot of quality circles. Maybe you don't need that many. Maybe 6 is not going to be a practical team size for you. Maybe you want to have things that work like these circles, but you don't need cross-functional teams, or you don't want to think about delivering one feature at a time, all those things. That's fine. This is a model, and only a model. This is not a way of saying this is the one true way of doing it. Look, it's perfect, it's crystal, it looks like a flywheel. No, this is a model, and only a model. The patterns that we use in this, those are what's valuable, and those can be tailored to any organizational structure. Hopefully, they'll start to see how that works before another few minutes go. I have to keep going. In the Game Without Thrones, we have many different qualities for these different circles. It's all about building castles to defend against. If you ever saw the TV show, the zombies, the dragons, the many feudal armies all warring on each other, we play the free folk who want to defend ourselves against them. I'm not going to go into any depth about what these qualities are and how they're judged in the game, because I only have a few minutes. So nevertheless, the kinds of qualities that are important to a modern business are not those qualities anyway. So if you come and play, then you get to play with the qualities of a castle. If you are working for a bank or a medical equipment supplier or a manufacturer or a hamburger franchise or whatever it is, you'll have very different qualities that your circles will worry about. So then we have a little pattern, very simple pattern. We have many frameworks, sociocracy, holacracy. They have these little circles, and then above the circles, there are more circles. So if this circle can't make a decision, then the circle above them makes a decision. And there are people who migrate between the circles and so on. Ultimately, though, those kinds of structures get dominated by the political concerns of the different teams. So we thought, why don't we represent the circles, the quality circles, instead of representing the teams? So each of these little councils has one representative from each of the quality circles, which winds up being 2 representatives from each team. So the teams are still plugged in. There's the same people, it's just a different shuffle. And what we do is we rotate the membership of the councils. I'll show you the table we use for that sort of rotation. Lots of different rotations are possible depending on what we're trying to get done. I am using the game to illustrate these practices. We have a lot of different variations in the field, and really it's the patterns that matter, not the game that matters. So we have 9 teams. We split them into groups of 3, and actually those quality circles usually are happening within one stream of 3 teams. So the way we look at it is there is one epic per stream. An epic we describe in our normal form of why, who, how, what. If you are familiar with impact mapping, Goiko Adzik's impact mapping, you know where that comes from. And in a breadth first product agility sense, there's a lot of other things that we could talk about there. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Suffice to say, powers of 3. That's Robin Dunbar. That's the Dunbar series. Dunbar didn't come up with one number. In fact, he didn't even come up with the number. He doesn't know who did. It just got named after him. Anyway, so we have 3 councils per stream. Why? Because we have 3 functions that we need to do to be able to build a castle. We have to prioritize the features of the castle. We have to coordinate ways of working agreements across our teams. We have to be able to integrate the features as they are delivered. Why do we need 3 councils to do that? Why couldn't we have 1? We could. The reason we do 3 in the game is that we want everybody to be able to keep playing. We don't want to have any dead air. It's all synchronized in the game. So this means that we get a lot of learning in a very short period of time. So the life cycle in the game, we do 20-minute cycles, as I said, and we split them into 4 activities, 5 minutes for each. So feature teams, each team built 1 castle feature. Who comes up with these features? The circles do. The councils prioritize them. After the 5 minutes in feature teams, then we do 5 minutes of quality circles. The circles propose new features, and they propose what we call treaties. These are proposals for ways of working. So, for example, if we were talking about a hamburger franchise, we propose that the refrigerator should be on the left of the room because most of our staff are left-handed. There might be another proposal that comes from the fry cooks who say, well, we propose that the refrigerator should be on the right-hand side of the room because we keep getting spattered with grease from the hamburgers every time we go to get the potatoes out of the refrigerator. We need ways to get to agreements on ways of working. And it's fine for it to happen within a team, but we have to align the teams. That means we have to align their ways of working. These treaties are important. We can't leave them to delegated authorities because do we decide a distance? Round councils prioritize, coordinate, and integrate features. And then ratification, which is to say, these treaties are proposed. If a feature gets a mission, basically, if we think in mission command terms, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It's not coming to me. It will later on. Doesn't matter. These teams have seen proposals that have come from circles that are council shared, and where, oh, we can refactor these proposals to make more sense together. Why don't we could say that there's going to be 2 refrigerators, one on the left and one on the right with different things inside. There's lots of ways to refactor proposals, but the team has to have autonomy. It has to be able to say, no, we veto that proposal. We're not going to take part in that. If that autonomy, if that decision-making capability doesn't rest with the team, well, then they're following orders and they're not autonomous. Now, that's the life cycle for the game we're talking about. Many other life cycles are possible. We're not saying this is ideal or perfect. It's a great way to play this particular game. So the 3 councils I talked about, we assemble features into a castle. I'm going too fast with my words, sorry. Assemble features into a castle and simplify. Prioritization, share feature proposals and order them. Coordination, share treaty proposals to refactor them. And I gave an example just then. So that's all very well if we've got 3 teams. But what do we do at enterprise scale where there's many levels of hierarchy? Well, we repeat this structure as a fractal. Now, we could repeat it to any depth you like. But in our game, we just do it for 60 people because it's a really good proof that you can do that. So we have 6 circles, and then there are 3 councils, and they take exactly the same form as the ones that are within a stream, but they operate at an epic level, where the ones at the stream level are operating at a feature level. Or if you think of a feature as something that can be released by itself. In epic, you can never finish off an epic. You simply go, well, we actually have opened the business constraint for that epic, so we don't need to worry about working that epic anymore. Key to this is that we have the same learning cadence at all levels. You could have this same structure as deep as you like, and you would still have, if you're playing it as a game, 20 minutes, but maybe 1 day as your lateral learning latency for the whole organization. Now, in the game, we have some rotation patterns. Don't worry about them. The key to the generality of this is when we talk about many levels, there are people who have expertise in things that have nothing to do, even in a hamburger franchise, that have nothing to do with flipping burgers. And those people need to be able to share their expertise. So what we can do without loss of generality in the model is we can replace any of the circles in any of the structure. We can replace a circle with a DRI to act as a permanent council member at any level. Or we could replace the 3 councils with just 1. Or there's lots of things we can do. Look at this as something where we've put together a set of patterns, not as a framework to follow, but as a model of using a toolkit. So in the game, we have some objectives. I'm not going to go into any real detail on those, just to give you an idea about what we're going to be doing. So we're building a castle that can shelter us and fight against, whatever it is, 9 kingdoms in Westeros. Well, there's a reason why we're building this castle. We are free folk. You might go, wait a second, who's going to provide the free folk with the wood and the stone and so on? That's a good question. And for that matter, who's going to make the deal to smuggle them south to do that? If you've never seen this show, don't worry about it. Suffice to say, there's a premise. If you have seen the show, of course, it ended very badly, but that doesn't matter. The context of the game world is interesting. There are also fire-breathing dragons. They can melt a lot of things. They can't melt stone, happily. So if you're building a castle, you need to be able to seal it up. And, of course, hordes of ice zombies. The one benefit of knowing things about ice zombies and learning about ice zombies that didn't make it into the show is astonishing to me. Ice zombies can't swim. Any moat for any castle will stop your ice zombies. So the show itself is based on the idea that feudal houses are bureaucracies and they can't learn. So we're building a castle. We could talk about that, but the key is we've made a treaty as free folk. We've made a treaty with one of the warlords, one of the feudal folk, a person who was very skeptical about the success of feudalism. In the show, he's called Bron. I'll call him Sir Bron. We've made a treaty. A treaty goes very well in a BDD format, a behavior-driven development format we're all familiar with from automated testing, from quality assurance, from Three Amigos. Given we build his castle, when we survive winter, then Sir Bron will host us in the castle as free folk forever. That's why we're building it. We're building it because it gives us a way to improve our lives. Well, that's a particular agreement we've got between two parties for mutual benefit. And that's the kind of working agreement we want to establish. So if you are a fan of the show, yeah, I'm going with a fan theory. You know, the Rains of Castamere, I think Bron was the last surviving Rain. And if you want to talk about that in the questions, that's fine. But I have a feeling we have more interesting things to talk about. So I'll wrap up. Enough of this. We're going to play this next week. If you're interested, I will share a link. This is one of a bunch of training games that we have in Xscale. The ones on the left are about product agility, the ones on the right are about business agility. There's lots more to talk about there. We're not going to talk about now. As Sam mentioned, I was going to say, not just 2016, 17, 18, we were recognized by Gartner 19 and 20 as well, and I expect this year too. So I think that's more than enough gas from me. So I am going to stop sharing and open the floor for questions. I have no idea how long I went because I started a bit late.
We are 2 minutes below after the timing. So let me just, there are some interesting questions. Let me just ask you one question. How do you start where companies are towards your model? First move, continuous evolution.
Very good question. So we have a pattern language we like to call pull transformation, where the idea is, instead of telling the organization everybody's going to change, you're all going to change, we like to do it like Gandhi. So how did Gandhi do it? He started with a salt march, a steel thread of change. He was able to get early adopters, harness them, not just at a particular stratum of society, but across the whole society. So what we want to do is get a dozen people, 20 people to make one of these progressive steel threads of capability. And then we want to grow it by splitting and doubling. And we've done this successfully at several large organizations. The most successful one I was involved with was Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which was a 50,000 person organization in 2011 to 14. And that led to what Michael Hart, who was CEO there, did at Barclays with John Smart. And then anyway, there's lots of history in all of this stuff. But the idea of pull transformation means it's easy. We have some very straightforward ways of finding these progressives. We don't have to convince any of the people who are resistant to change. And then we simply allow people to join the new capability at an exponential rate, and we have a way of accelerating it based on outcomes. Enough said. I can't hear you, Sam.
Thank you. Now we are 4 minutes behind the schedule. One quick question. Where can we find the link to subscribe to the game?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, I go over here. So here is the sign up, and I will share. There is a waiting list, so if you wind up not getting in at first, don't worry. And this is far from the. And we've run this with Lego in physical rooms in the past. This augmented reality version is really what's exciting to me. So if I go to chat. So there's a platform. There we go. There's the link in the chat for the sign up. I'll show off the platform for a moment. So on the right, you can see a whole bunch of bits of castle, and you can see the little people who would live in the castle and so on. And on the left, this is something that it looks like what I just described. These are little meeting rooms, just like little Zoom rooms, except instead of people pushing you around, you have agency. You can walk from one to another, and you can actually see everybody's video embedded in the space. So when you're in one of these little rooms, I don't think I want to, I'll go there anyway. When you're in one of these little rooms, if I turn on the video, it might interfere with Zoom, so I won't. But anyway, when you're in one of these little rooms and you look around, it's mapped out so you can actually see people's attention. If one person's talking, you can see everybody looking at them. You can point to people. All the social cues we lose with Zoom come back. So the lovely thing with this tool called Relo is it integrates intimately with Miro, which means that we are able to put particular kinds of functions embedded in the space. We can embed lots of different Kanbans, and leaving your conversation, you can actually get information to inform your conversation from all over the organization as well. So very simple, very powerful paradigm, and you guys are already using it for the conference, so you already have some idea about it.
Thank you, Peter. This concludes our session. It was lovely having you here with us today. And for the attendees, and now it's time, as yesterday, for our workshop on Relo. So let's all meet there on Relo. And just one precision, please note that the rooms are named, join the room that starts with your name. For instance, there is a room with IGLK. Join this room if your name starts with I or J or L or K. Thank you, and see you there. Bye-bye.